Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 2021 Air Force Reserve Officer Training Corps Distinguished Alumni Induction Ceremony, honoring Colonel Guion Bluford. I'm Cadet Baring, and I will be your narrator for today's ceremony. At this time, please silence all phones and other electronic devices. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. We are honored you could join us for this special event. At this time, please rise for the entrance of the official party and remain standing for the singing of the national anthem and the invocation. At this time, Chaplain Robert will now deliver the invocation.
It is truly an honor to be a part of this event to recognize and celebrate the many, many accomplishments of Colonel Bluford. As the scriptures that give us the basis of freedom say in Psalms 37, 8 and 9, they feast on the abundance of your house. You give them drink from your river of delights. For with you is the fountain of life. In your light we see light. Let us pray. Father, we praise you for our lives and thank you for being the author of the fullness of life as you are the eternal fountain. The abundant life, Lord, as you have shown, comes with sacrifice and the call not to be served, but to serve. Something you know, and something that has been witnessed in Colonel Bluford. As we seek to honor Colonel Bluford, I thank you for his example. And as for the Air Force ROTC cadets here in attendance, as they look ahead to all that you will do as they serve our nation and communities, protect them. To close with a blessing, may the desires and expectations of today on the many hearts in this room be found. And all God's people said, Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain Ryber. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
native of Philadelphia, an Air Force major, and holder of a PhD in aerospace engineering. Dr. Guion Bluford is now in training for spaceflight.
Dr. Guion Bluford, better known as Guy.
Guion Bluford.
Guy Bluford.
Colonel Guion Bluford.
Guion Bluford.
Dr. Guion Bluford, the first black astronaut to travel ever in space.
Guion Bluford Jr. was born in 1942, one of 3 children, and was raised in West Philadelphia. He was once told in high school that he wasn't college material before attending our very own Penn State University. During his time here, he obtained a degree in aerospace engineering as well as commissioned in the Air Force through ROTC. It was in the Air Force where he trained as a fighter pilot and would work his way up to becoming a colonel. Bluford flew 144 combat missions during the Vietnam War before earning a doctorate in aerospace engineering from the Air Force Institute of Technology. Colonel Bluford would become the first African-American astronaut launched into space when in 1978, NASA selected him and 34 others out of 10,000 applicants in their first competition to become space shuttle astronauts. On August 30th, 1983, he rode into Earth's orbit on the Shuttle Orbiter Challenger on the STS-8 mission before launching into space 3 more times in 1985, 1991, and 1992 on 3 more missions. Even after all of this, in 1987, Bluford earned a graduate degree in business administration from the University of Houston. He left NASA in 1993 for a private sector career in the information technology and engineering services field. He is an active alumni of Penn State, regularly returning for invited lectures, keynotes, commencement speeches, and other festivities. The Penn State Alumni Association presented Dr. Bluford with its Distinguished Alumni Award in 1983 and the Alumni Fellows Award in 1986. As an American Institute of Aeronautics Fellow, he was inducted into the International Space Hall of Fame in 1997. With a lifetime full of accolades and awards under his belt, Colonel Retired Bluford lives as an inspiration to us all. His career, as well as his legacy, continues to inspire many every day.
Colonel Bluford has been an inspiration to me. He has achieved a lot throughout his lifetime and career. He inspires me to want to do the best because he always strives to do the best.
As an aspiring space professional at that 720, I look to former cadets like Colonel Bluford who paved way for what is possible. Colonel Bluford is a source of great inspiration for current cadets like me who dream of becoming the next generation of space professionals.
As a cadet who aspires to be in the Air or Space Force, Colonel Bluford inspires me to be a better version of myself. He sets the standard of who a detachment 720 cadet embodies and who they want to be as a future officer.
As a youth coming from Nigeria and entering the American educational system, I believe Colonel Bluford and I have had or shared similar challenges. It has always been my dream to fly and go into space, but being told that I could not do that because I would not survive in a competitive environment and was told to go to a community college, that was a blow to my confidence. While many people would know Colonel Bluford as the first African American in space, I see him as a former cadet of Detachment 720 who, despite his ordeals, has achieved what many people can only dream of. To me, that is the inspiration I draw from him.
Today, we would like to extend a warm welcome to all of our distinguished guests, members of the Penn State and Air Force Reserve Officer Training Corps community, family and friends, and the cadets and cadre of the Pennsylvania State University Air Force ROTC Detachment 720. Please hold applause until all have been introduced. The Commander, Gene M. Holmes Center for Officer Accessions and Citizen Development, Brigadier General Leslie A. Mayer. The Commander, Air Force Reserve Officer Training Corps, Colonel Christopher L. Bennett. Colonel Guion Bluford, United States Air Force retired. The Executive Vice President and Provost, Nicholas P. Jones. Dr. Jeff Adams, Associate Vice President and Associate Dean for Undergraduate Education. The Command Chief, Gene M. Holmes Center for Officer Accession and Citizen Development, Chief Master Sergeant Gilda M. Alexander. The Commander, Air Force Reserve Officer Training Corps, Northeast Region, Colonel Steve A. Smith. The Commander, Air Force Reserve Officer Training Corps, Detachment 720, Colonel Lawrence B. Havard. Director of Veteran Affairs and Services, Colonel Eugene McFeely, United States Air Force, retired. We also extend a warm welcome to all other commanders, senior leaders, staff, and guests who have joined us on this special occasion. We hope you enjoy the ceremony. Penn State and Air Force family and friends, thank you for joining us today to honor Colonel Bluford's amazing accomplishments. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to introduce the Commander of the Home Center, Brigadier General Leslie A. Mayer.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
We'll do it without the mic. That might be a little less obtrusive, right? And so congratulations, Penn State, on being the home of the next ROTC Distinguished Alumni Award. Dr. Adams, thank you for hosting me this afternoon. We had a great talk, and I'm even more excited about the program that you run here. To Colonel McFeely, thanks for what you do for all of our veterans here on the campus. You give them a connection, you give our kids a place to land, and I am a little teary about that because I was so moved by what you provided. Thank you so much. Thank you for the support that you give Detachment 720. It means so much to every one of my cadets. To the men and women of Detachment 720, you have a lot to celebrate today. Thank you for such an awesome nomination. It was just natural. When I got that package, there was no question that we should induct Colonel Bluford into the ranks of distinguished alumni that were born out of the ROTC program. And then to the planning committee. So I have Major Valverde here in the audience somewhere. She has been working from afar to put this together, as well as the cadet cadre that put this together for us today. What a class act. Nice job. And I appreciate this so much. So I am moved by this nomination. And as I read the history of Colonel Bluford, I was struck by how important it is for this induction today, at this time, in our current history. You've got lots of inductions that you have been a part of, but this one is extra special for this group and for me because of what you represent at this time. And so as I was looking through what you had written and what you had spoke of, there was a couple of things that really struck me. And I'm going to try to center my comments on the views from the ROTC cadet. You'll hear a lot about what he did in his flying career, and it's amazing. What he's done in his space career, and it's amazing. And he continues to serve in his civilian role even today. We can all hope to be as excellent in our service as Colonel Bluford. So, Colonel Bluford started out in Philly. So again, I'm kind of impacted by that. My husband, he is from this area, and so I know this area well. And I was trying to imagine what it was like to be a teenager right after the war. We're in the middle of the Korean War, and we're about to start on a space race. How those forces must have really just induced a love for everything that you came to fruition for you in your career, even as a child. I love the story about his mother giving him money to get on the train, to go down to the YMCA and put together airplanes, play ping pong, play chess, so well that you became part of the high school team for 2 of those, and you would be building space and aircraft well into your adulthood. Those first impacts on your child, making such an impression on how you would lead your life after. And there was a comment about do what you love, or love what you do, and do what you love. I think that's a mantra we could all live. And it started right there at that YMCA and with a family of role models. So we talked about role models today in the Cadet Corps, right? And as we talked about role models, I just kept thinking back to what I'd read about Colonel Bluford. He was not the first to get a master's in his family, as I had been. He had a long history of education in his background. And it was impressed upon him that he would not only be educated, but the women around him would be educated, at a time when that wasn't always a sure thing. And I liked how he talked about the strength of his mother and the education she had received, so that when some tragedy happened in his family, she was able to take her and her 3 boys and her ailing husband all the way to success for her 3 boys, despite the loss of your father. Pretty strong woman, right? And that was because of her education. And he impressed it upon his wife to continue her master's. So if you are ever wondering if this is worth it, you guys, sitting in those chairs, grinding away at those studies, it is. And he gives us so many examples as to why that is true. I also was very impressed by his determination to make it to the goal. So you began flying, and you were like, hey, I like this flying gig, but I'd really like to get back to engineering. I'd really like to take this education that I fought so hard to get, and it wasn't a sure thing for you, and you got it, and you kept working at a career that would get you back to your love for engineering, because you had a clear-sighted goal after the war to pursue that love and to make it something that would contribute to our nation. And so then it's also that role model of service. There was going to be many times that you encountered during your career, during your time in the Air Force, during your time with NASA, during your time with society, that you had to basically fight for your place. And you had never taken your eye off the goal of service to this nation that sometimes made you fight for your place. That can be a daunting task. But he never took his eye off that. And to this day, today, he continues to be a role model of service. I often think to the discussions that Colonel Bennett and I have about what do we see in our youth that makes them right to be not only a ROTC cadet, but a second lieutenant in my Air Force. We look at grades. I don't think that we would have seen Colonel Bluford with the grades that he brought to ROTC, because we had raised the bar so high that sometimes we keep people out. At the time that Colonel Bluford went through and was sitting in your chairs, they would have filled this auditorium 4 times. There were so many in the detachment. Think about that. You had 50 people in your cadre, not 7. And they were about to embark on a career path that would put them in harm's way immediately after graduating. How many of you have that danger right now? Maybe some. But he never kept his eye. He never took his eye off that ball. When others were partying it up at the campus, he found a safe place to gather with friends, with trusted friends, and Linda, and you found a way to get through because you knew the seriousness of your goals. And you achieved those and so much more. Sir, I'm honored to be the one to speak on your behalf today of how you were as a cadet and the impacts of being a role model with clear goals and a clear eye for service. and someone that will carry on a tradition that was so hard fought. I am honored for that, and I hope that I will continue to serve after I leave this uniform in a way that honors what you did when you left the uniform. Thank you on behalf of a grateful nation, and I know these cadets will carry the spirit of Colonel Bluford in their service, and they will make their units stronger, better, with a clear eye on the goal. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, General Mayor. At this time, we will be revealing the dedicatory plaque that will be displayed in the Air Force ROTC headquarters on the wall of Distinguished Alumni and in Wagner Building, home of Detachment 720 at Pennsylvania State University.
Delta! Tag hut!
The Distinguished Alumni plaque reads as follows. Colonel Guion S. Bluford distinguished himself through exceptionally meritorious and superior service to the United States Air Force and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration over 29 years. Colonel Bluford earned his commission as a second lieutenant through the Air Force Reserve Officer Training Corps program at the Pennsylvania State University, where he commissioned as a distinguished graduate. Colonel Bluford's flying career started at Williams Air Force Base, where he received his pilot wings in January of 1966. During the Vietnam War, he flew 144 combat missions, with 65 being over North Vietnam. He served there with distinction. Over his time as a fighter pilot, he logged over 5,100 flight hours to include 1,300 hours as a T-38 instructor pilot. In 1974, Colonel Bluford was accepted to the Air Force Institute of Technology and earned his master's degree and doctor of philosophy degree in aerospace engineering. Out of 10,000 applicants, he was selected to the National Aeronautics and Space Administration space program and was chosen to join the new space shuttle team in January of 1978. On August 30th, 1983, Colonel Bluford made history by becoming the first African American in space aboard Space Shuttle Challenger. During this historic mission, he completed 98 Earth orbits in 145 hours. Colonel Bluford's last trip to space was on December 2nd, 1992, as a crew member aboard Space Shuttle Discovery. In all, he completed 4 flights and logged over 688 hours in space. His decorations include the National Defense Service Medal, Vietnam Cross of Gallantry with Palm, 10 Air Force Air Medals, Air Force Commendation Medal, Air Force Institute of Technology's Mervyn E. Gross Award, Air Force Meritorious Service Award, 2 NASA Group Achievement Awards, Pennsylvania's Distinguished Service Medal, NASA Space Flight Medal, Defense Superior Service Medal, Defense Meritorious Service Medal, and the Pennsylvania State University Distinguished Alumni Award. Cadets, please be at ease. Ladies and gentlemen, the Commander of Air Force ROTC, Colonel Christopher L. Bennett, will now present to you the Colonel Guion Bluford Distinguished Alumni Plaque. Gentlemen, please come forward for the unveiling. And now, Colonel Bennett will present Colonel Bluford with the prop and wings. Sir, we have one more thing for you. Oh. Thank you, Colonel Bluford, for your outstanding service and selfless sacrifices. On behalf of the men and women of Air University, Air Force Reserve Officer Training Corps, and the Pennsylvania State University Detachment 720, congratulations on receiving this distinction. We are proud to have had the opportunity to honor your lifetime of distinguished service. We would like to present a token of our appreciation for your service and devotion to our great nation. On behalf of Detachment 720, Cadet Stewart will be presenting the Detachment Delta coin. Please be seated.
It's good to be back. Beginning to feel old all the time. It really is an honor for me to be here. I was at Penn State from 60 to 64. And I tell people when I came here, ROTC was mandatory. So freshmen and sophomore males all had to take ROTC. I really hadn't paid too much attention when I came on the campus. And as you matriculated in and you figured out what courses you were going to take, they would say, what ROTC you going to be in? You're going to be taking Army, Navy, or Air Force. For me, it seemed rather obvious I'll go Air Force because I'm going to be majoring in aerospace engineering. And so I went down to Wagner. They gave me a uniform, and for 2 years, I was part of the division. We had a division, just to give you a feel. 2,000 Air Force cadets. And so, we all had uniforms like what you have. We would have to wear them when we got out there on the drill field. The drill field was on the other side of Wagner. So once a week we put on a uniform and go out there. So it was an interesting experience. It was a new experience for me because when I came to Penn State, I had never even considered the military. My goal, I keep telling people, my goal when I came to Penn State was to get a degree in aerospace engineering and buy a Corvette Stingray and go work for Boeing Aircraft. And I keep telling people that I'm a failure because I never got to work for Boeing Aircraft. And I got married at my end of my senior year, and my wife convinced me that I didn't need a Corvette. I never got the Corvette. But when I think about my Air Force career, my success in life is because I made a career in the Air Force. And it was something that I hadn't even planned for. I decided to go advanced Air Force because it seemed to be the right thing to do, an opportunity to serve my country and so forth. And to do it as an officer, as a second lieutenant. When I went advanced ROTC, I couldn't get into pilot. I couldn't be a pilot candidate. I couldn't pass the physical. I couldn't imagine. I couldn't pass the physical. My blood pressure was too high. And I figured probably I had stayed up the night before trying to get caught up on some course or whatever. And so they offered me other opportunities, and so I was going to go into the Air Force as an engineer. I figured it would be a great opportunity to get some engineering experience and so forth and so on. So I did that. And then between my junior and senior year, I went to ROTC summer camp. I went up to Otis Air Force Base and 4 or 5 weeks of ROT, calisthenics, and all that sort of stuff. Got a ride in a T-Bird, first time I got a ride in the Air Force airplane. And at the end of ROTC summer camp, I was going through the physical, and the doctor said, "Why don't you want to be a pilot?" And I said, "Well, I couldn't. I didn't pass the physical." Well, he thought I could be a pilot. He said, "You look fine. I think you can be a pilot." So I changed my mind. I changed my mind, and I decided I wanted to be a pilot candidate. My thinking was, I would be a better engineer if I knew how to actually fly the airplane. So I became a pilot candidate. And in my senior year, I came back up here, and I got my private pilot's license. I still remember that. ROTC up here for me was being on the staff, but I would go out once a week to State College and team up with my instructor, Ken Farwell, and I got my private pilot's license. Flew a Cessna 150. I still remember soloing out in the airplane. I remember getting into a spin in the airplane. I'll tell you that. That was an interesting example. And then I remember going cross country, so it was an exciting time. For me, my senior year at Penn State was exciting because I was majoring in aerospace engineering. And I got out and actually flew an airplane. So it was really a great experience. And when I graduated from Penn State in '64, I had a degree in aerospace engineering. I had my private pilot's license. I had a commission in the Air Force as a second lieutenant, and oh yeah, I got this wife who I met as a freshman, and she decided to come along with me and basically give up that Corvette thing around. Been in the Air Force for 29 years. It's exciting. I think the thing I enjoy the most are the people. Great people. Great people. You'll move throughout your whole career, and you'll meet some really great people. I think for me it was exciting because I grew up in Philadelphia, and all of a sudden I was in Phoenix, Arizona, and in Texas, and in Florida. And so it was an exciting experience from that point of view. And I got to work with people from all over the country, so it was an exciting experience all the way around. I got to fly fighters. I take real pride in the fact that I got 5,200 hours of jet time, real high-quality jet time, and I take pride in that. I got both a master's and PhD in aerospace engineering. I was very fortunate to have the Air Force send me back to school. I thought that was a great experience for me, and I had an opportunity to be an aerospace engineer, which is what I always wanted to do, and I was doing that at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. In '77, I was coming up for reassignment in the Air Force, and I really hadn't thought too much about being in the space program. And I started looking around for jobs. I wanted a job where I could fly and use my technical skill, and I was still struggling with trying to find a job. And I decided to apply for NASA. I wasn't sure that I'd ever get into that program. And I got accepted. I still remember I applied through Air Force. There were about 1,000 of us who applied for to be considered for NASA. That Air Force, I think, has thinned us down to about 100 people. Sent our names off to NASA, Navy, Army. I'm pretty sure the other organizations did the same. And then I remember in '77 waiting to hear the word as to where I stood. NASA looked at 8,000 or 10,000 people, and they slowly but surely winded it down. And in the summer of '77, they started selecting finalists, which was finalists. So in the summer of '77, you read in the newspaper, NASA had selected 20 finalists, and they were supposed to go down to Johnson Space Center. And so I wondered if I would make that cut. And I still remember I was at Washington, D.C., TDY, when I came back to my room one evening, and there was a little note on the door which said, contact NASA. This is like on Wednesday. And so I contacted them, and they said, we've selected you as a finalist. We need to have you in Houston on Sunday. I still remember that. I remember telling them that. Well, in TDY, I won't be back until the office until late Friday. I need to talk to my boss and see if I can get orders. Otherwise, I may just wave you off for a week or whatever. So I called my boss, Colonel McKelvey, and I said, I got this thing, and I'm going to be back on Friday. I don't see how we can turn it around. And he said, no problem. When you show back up on Friday, I'll hand you orders to go. And he did exactly that. So I went down to Houston for a week with 19 other people as finalists. All of them leave tall buildings with a single band. I was questioning why I was in this place. Got a week, take a look at NASA. Got to meet astronauts, exciting people. I still remember meeting some of the astronauts walking through their offices. They give you a physical that lasts a week. So it's a pretty extensive physical. You didn't know if you made it or not. They gave you a psychological exam. and so forth and so on. And at the end of the week, you're wondering, did they like me? All that sort of stuff. They didn't say a thing, and they said, "Thanks for coming," and sent us on our way. I was in group number 9 of 10 groups. There was one more group of 20 that came after me, and so there were about 200 finalists. And this was October, November. I remember as I was leaving, I talked to the NASA guys, and I said, "Hey, I got this Air Force pilot physical in November, and if I pass that, let that right Pat know, so I don't have to do this thing again." So they did. And when they sent a notice to Air Force that said he passed not only the Air Force physical, but he also passed the NASA astronaut physical. So that was a real bonus for me. I still remember Monday morning in January. This is Dayton, Ohio. We had more snow than I'd ever seen in my life in Dayton, Ohio. So I came to work that morning, and as I was driving to work, I had heard that NASA had selected 35 astronauts. I was curious at who these guys were. NASA had been sending out notices to people indicating when they eliminated you. So during that summer, people would come up to me and say, "Have you gotten your letter?" And I would say, "No, then you're doing fine. You're doing fine." You got no. So as I was driving to work, I said to myself, "Well, they haven't sent out the letter yet. Maybe mail isn't always the fastest in the world." So I got to work. And I probably was in the office maybe an hour or so before I got this call from Scott. And he said, "How's the weather in Dayton?" And I said, "Oh, it's miserable. I mean, we had snow drifts and all this stuff, and it's just terrible. I just, all this sort of," he just let me moan for about 5 minutes. Then he said, "You know it doesn't snow in Houston. Would you like to come to Houston?" And at that point I knew that I had been selected. NASA had contacted all 200 finalists that particular morning, and so I felt very fortunate. And then they said, "Don't tell anybody. We'll announce it then, I did call the wife and say I got selected. And then I still remember wandering around the laboratory, and people would say, "Have you heard?" But at the end of the day, I announced to the people that work for me that I had been selected. This was January, and that I would be leaving that summer for the astronaut program. So I was excited, and it was a great experience for me. That July I left, the wife and I left. We went to Houston and joined 34 other people who all came into the astronaut program to learn to fly this vehicle called the shuttle. For me, it was an exciting experience. I had spent most of my time in the airplane business, and I loved the airplane business, so I was being transitioned to the space business. I also was transitioned in at a time when we were still developing this vehicle, so I got to learn a lot about developing vehicles, as well as learning to fly in space and working with astronauts in the astronaut office. So it was a nice experience from that point of view. Came in 78. We flew the vehicle for the first time in 81. I still remember being at Edwards Air Force Base when the vehicle came in and landed for the first time, and I knew we had a great vehicle. We really had a humdinger of a vehicle. And so everybody in the astronaut office was excited about it. And then 82, we started flying the vehicle as an experiment, as a test vehicle for the first 4 flights, and then we started putting mission specialists on board, starting with flight number 5. And I still remember the morning in 82, Monday morning, where after the astronaut meeting, we would normally have a weekly astronaut meeting, when the head of the astronaut office came up to me and said, We need to have you go over to the headquarters building because the big cheese wants to talk to you about this. So I'm wandering over to the headquarters building. I wander over and meet somebody else who's going to the same meeting. We were both speculating as to what was going on, and we finally found out when we got over there that we'd been selected for STS-8, which we were both excited about. Flew 4 times, great experience, just phenomenal experience. I worked with on 4 different crews and did all sorts of experiments on orbit. And for me, it was a dream come true in many ways. My Air Force career was starting to come to an end after I flew 4 times in space, and so I realized that I was going to eventually have to leave the program. You do get too old to fly in space, though. When I got the guy who, Star Trek guy, I'm here pretty soon. And so I wanted to go back to the aerospace business, and that's, I retired from the Air Force and found a job in Cleveland, running a division for a company, a minority-owned division, and had a great job being an administrator running an organization of, would you believe, 78 PhD type people who are doing all sorts of research in aerospace. So I had an opportunity to do that. When I look back here, my career started with Detachment 720. Hard for me to believe, I didn't realize that at the time. So my career, Air Force career, started here. I never realized as a student here how exciting that would be. But it's been a thrill. As I said once before, I owe my success to the United States Air Force. And so I'm very pleased to be here, and I hope that all of you will have an exciting career, as I did in my 29 years in the United States Air Force. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colonel Bluford. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today as we honor this great leader and graduate of our Air Force Reserve Officer Training Corps and the Pennsylvania State University. Please stand for the singing of the Air Force song and the departure of the official party and distinguished guests. This concludes the 2021 Air Force Reserve Officer Training Corps Distinguished Alumni Ceremony. Please join us in the foyer for light refreshments.